Would you still love someone if they kept their entire past hidden from you? He had it all: a promising career, a sharp mind, and a heart big enough to care for the ones he loved. Cody Matthews built his life on structure and precision, a man who thrived on routine, who believed that hard work and dedication could shield him from chaos. But love has a way of rewriting even the most carefully planned lives. When he met Lily Anderson, it felt like fate. She was everything he wasn't: creative, spontaneous, full of life. Their love story moved fast, too fast for some, a whirlwind romance that ended in wedding vows within months. Those closest to Cody whispered their doubts, but he was certain he had found his person. Then, everything changed. A quiet tension crept into Cody's world. He stopped smiling as much. His friends noticed the shift, the anxious glances, the way his voice tightened when he spoke about his marriage. Something weighed on him, something he never shared. Days before his death, he confided in a friend. His words carried a weight they didn't understand at the time. Then came the 911 call. A voice, steady yet trembling, telling officers she had found her husband lifeless in their home. What police discovered behind those walls was far worse than they expected. This wasn't a random break-in. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. A crime that raised more questions than answers. A secret hidden beneath vows of love. A discovery so devastating it shattered everything in its path. What had Cody found out? What pushed his wife to make that call? And when the truth finally surfaced, would anyone believe it? Welcome to True Crime Theatre HQ. For more gripping crime stories, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And if this case left you questioning everything, share it with your friends. Sometimes, the truth is stranger than fiction. Love has a way of pulling people in, sometimes too fast, sometimes too deep. For Cody Matthews, it was a force that swept him off his feet, a promise of something new, something different. He was never the type to take risks, not in his career, not in his personal life. Everything in his world was carefully structured, methodical, planned. A rising star in the tech industry, he thrived in predictability. But love doesn't follow rules. And when he met Lily Anderson, every plan he had ever made no longer seemed to matter. Lily was unlike anyone Cody had ever known. She was bold, vibrant, and full of life. Where he found comfort in order, she embraced the unknown. Where he built his life around discipline, she lived in the moment. Opposites, yet somehow drawn to each other with an intensity that neither could explain. Their connection was immediate, undeniable. It didn't take long before they became inseparable, their lives intertwined in a way that felt inevitable. The relationship moved quickly, too quickly, some would say. Within months, Cody was proposing, convinced that Lily was the missing piece he had been searching for. Friends and family were shocked. Cody wasn't impulsive. Yet here he was, planning a future with someone he had barely known. People questioned his decision. Was it love? Was it desperation? Or was it something else entirely? Rachel, Cody's younger sister, was one of the skeptics. She had spent years watching her brother be cautious, always thinking ahead, always measuring every step before taking it. This wasn't like him. And something about Lily didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she avoided talking about her past. Maybe it was the way Cody's behavior shifted, how he seemed distracted, uneasy, even as he smiled and told everyone he had never been happier. But love makes people see what they want to see. Cody ignored the warnings, dismissed the concerns, convinced himself that for the first time in a long time, he was truly happy. He wanted to believe that. He needed to believe that. He never imagined that his new life, his new love, would become the thing that destroyed him. Because there was something Cody didn't know. And when he found out, it was already too late. As the months passed, something began to shift in Cody. His once calm, structured demeanor started to crack. Friends began to notice the subtle signs. He was more anxious, distracted, on edge. The spark that had once defined him now seemed dimmer, buried beneath a growing tension. Cody, the man who had always been in control, was no longer in control of his own mind. It was as if the weight of something he couldn't explain was eating away at him. He began to pull away, not just from his colleagues, but from the people who cared about him most. His conversations with Rachel became strained. She, who had always been at the center of his life, the one he had spent years trying to protect, was now the source of concern. Cody had always tried to save Rachel from herself, her addiction, her erratic choices. But now it wasn't just Rachel's actions that bothered him. It was Lily's relationship with Rachel. The bond between his wife and his sister grew too close for Cody's comfort. It wasn't just the late-night phone calls or the secretive whispers. They were beginning to cross boundaries Cody couldn't ignore. Lily's unpredictable connection with Rachel seemed to mirror the chaos Cody had always fought so hard to distance himself from. He feared that the emotional instability that had gripped his sister was starting to affect his marriage. But Cody couldn't put his finger on it. He couldn't explain why, but something felt deeply wrong. And in those rare moments when he allowed himself to speak, it was to his best friend, Jake. Just days before his death, Cody confided in him, his voice laced with unease. "I don't know what's happening, man. I don't know if I'm losing it or if something's really off. I feel like I'm losing control of everything." His words were heavy, filled with a fear that seemed out of place for someone who had always prided himself on being level-headed. Jake listened, offering the comfort of a friend, but inside he couldn't help but wonder. What had Cody discovered? What was it that had shaken his once unshakable confidence to the core? The feeling that something was wrong was not just in Cody's mind. It was real, and it was closing in fast. On the morning of November 18th, 2020, the phone rang in the Lakeview Police Department, its shrill tone breaking the quiet calm of the day. The voice on the other end was steady, almost eerily calm, but underneath it there was a tremor, a subtle but unmistakable crack in the composure. It was Lily Matthews. Her voice, though unnervingly controlled, told a story all on its own. She claimed to have found her husband, Cody, dead in their condo. No hysteria, no panic, just a chillingly methodical recount of the events. Something was wrong. No one who finds their spouse lying lifeless in a pool of their own blood speaks like this. The detectives could sense it immediately, the coldness, the distance in her words. When officers arrived at the upscale condo in the heart of downtown Lakeview, they were met with a scene so brutal it left even the most seasoned officers unsettled. Cody's body was discovered lying in the laundry room, surrounded by blood. Multiple stab wounds marred his chest, his arms bruised from the violent struggle that had taken place. This wasn't an accidental death. No, this was deliberate. The room told its own grim story. Blood spattered across the walls, pooling beneath Cody's lifeless body. The high-end washer and dryer, usually pristine and spotless, were now tainted with the chaos of violence. The smell in the air was foul, not the fresh scent of detergent, but the unmistakable odor of death. Nearby, a bloody kitchen knife lay discarded, its presence far from coincidental. Lily, the one who had placed the call, was found standing outside when the officers arrived, her hands trembling, but her demeanor strangely composed, almost as if she were detached from the tragedy unfolding around her. There was no desperate crying, no tear-filled eyes, just a woman who appeared almost too calm. Detectives Jonathan Harris and Michelle Cross, veterans of the Lakeview Police Department, immediately began to question Lily. It wasn't the first time they had encountered a distraught spouse, but something about Lily didn't sit right. The way she spoke, too methodical, too controlled, set off an alarm in their minds. She didn't act like someone who had just lost the love of their life. As the interrogation continued, the detectives couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was hiding something. There was an undercurrent of fear in her responses, but it wasn't fear of losing Cody. It was something else, something darker. The more they probed, the more they felt the tight grip of something they couldn't yet see. But they were sure of one thing. Lily Matthews knew more than she was letting on. Something felt off. Something didn't add up, and the detectives were determined to find out why. As the investigation deepened, more pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each one more unsettling than the last. Lily's calm demeanor, her distance from the tragic events, and the growing tension surrounding her marriage were no longer coincidences. It was during the forensic examination of Lily's personal history that the first cracks began to appear. Her therapy sessions, once thought to be merely about relationship struggles, revealed a deeper and much more complex issue, one that Lily had been hiding for years. In these confidential sessions with her therapist, Dr. Emily Parker, Lily spoke about her emotional turmoil, her internal battle with her identity, and the fear of being rejected by Cody if he ever discovered the truth. But that wasn't the only secret Lily had buried. There was something more, something far more damaging to her carefully crafted life. The investigation revealed that Lily had been carrying on a secret affair, one that had stayed hidden from Cody. And it wasn't just any affair, it was with his own sister Rachel. For Cody, this was the breaking point. He had sensed something was wrong. He had felt the strain between Lily and Rachel, the unspoken tension, the way his wife seemed to prioritize Rachel over him at times. It had troubled him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Now, as the truth emerged, Cody's worst fears were realized. His sister had crossed a line, and Lily, the woman he had married, was at the center of it all. But the affair wasn't the only bombshell waiting to explode. A breakthrough came when investigators turned their attention to Cody's personal belongings, specifically his laptop. What they found there sent shockwaves through the investigation. Hidden files, emails, journals, therapy receipts lay buried in the depths of his computer. Cody had been keeping track of everything. Through those emails and journal entries, Cody had uncovered something about Lily that she had desperately tried to keep hidden. His heart sank as he read the revelations. Lily was not the woman she had claimed to be. Before she became Lily Matthews, she had lived as Liam Anderson, a man. She had transitioned from male to female, a secret she had never shared with Cody. The discovery was a betrayal far beyond what he could have imagined. His own wife had built an entire life, an entire identity, based on a lie. As the weight of the truth settled over the investigation, the detectives pieced together a chilling narrative. Lily had concealed her past from Cody, buried the truth deep within herself. And now, it appeared that the lies were no longer enough to hold everything together. Cody had uncovered the secret, and the confrontation that followed would be the catalyst for a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. Lily's past had come crashing into her present, and it was unraveling every part of her carefully constructed world. And as the pieces continued to fall, it became clear that the truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The night that would forever alter the course of their lives began like any other. Cody came home, his mind heavy with the truth he had uncovered. His world had been shattered by the discovery of Lily's hidden past, and now the time had come to confront her. There was no more pretending, no more avoiding the inevitable. He knew what he had to do. As the door closed behind him, the weight of the silence in the room was almost suffocating. Lily was already there, her usual composure masking the storm brewing inside her. Cody's heart pounded as he faced the woman he had married, his wife, who had kept so much of herself hidden from him and whose betrayal had cut him deeper than any knife ever could. "You weren't honest with me," Cody said, his voice steady but filled with hurt. "I know what you've been hiding." Lily froze, her face momentarily betraying a flicker of panic. Then it was gone. She regained control, but it was too late. Cody had already seen through the facade. He knew, and he was angry, not just for what she had done, but for the lies that had poisoned their entire relationship. What followed was a confrontation unlike any other. The tension that had been building for months exploded in that moment, words flying like daggers, accusations, fears, regrets. Both of them were caught in the storm of emotions that neither knew how to control. But there was more at play than just words. Anger had given way to something more dangerous, an intensity that neither could manage. Lily's version of events was clear: self-defense, panic, a moment of fear that spiraled into something she couldn't stop. She claimed that when Cody confronted her, she feared for her life. In that split second of chaos, she grabbed the kitchen knife, desperate to protect herself from the man she loved, but now felt she couldn't trust. But the evidence told a different story. Cody's body didn't bear the marks of someone fighting to protect themselves. No defensive wounds, no sign that he had tried to fight back, to shield himself from the violence. The wounds on his body were too precise, too personal. This wasn't an act of self-defense. It was an attack, brutal and unrelenting. The violent struggle that Lily had described in her version of events didn't add up. The blood spatter, the position of the body, the way the scene unfolded, all pointed to something far darker than a moment of fear gone wrong. The question lingered, unanswered. Was this an act of desperation, a moment of sheer panic that went too far? Or was there something more behind the attack? Something rooted in anger, in betrayal, in a desire to silence the truth forever? As the investigation continued to unfold, the detectives were left to wonder. Had Cody's discovery of Lily's past ignited a deadly confrontation, or was this murder the culmination of something more sinister that had been brewing beneath the surface all along? The trial that followed was one the town of Lakeview would never forget. On February 10th, 2021, Lily Matthews stood before a jury, charged with second-degree murder for the brutal killing of her husband, Cody. What had begun as a passionate love story now played out in the cold, unforgiving glare of the courtroom. It was no longer just about a marriage. It was about betrayal, fear, and the undeniable truth that had shattered everything. The prosecution's case was built on one simple word: betrayal. They painted a portrait of a woman driven by rage, a woman who had lived a lie for years, only to have her carefully constructed world come crashing down when Cody uncovered the truth. They argued that Lily had planned the murder, that her actions were not an act of self-defense, but rather the cold, calculated response of someone pushed to the edge. Cody's discovery had not been a mere shock to her. It had been the trigger for a violent outburst, a moment of premeditated violence that could no longer be controlled. Witness after witness took the stand. Cody's best friend, Jake, spoke of the anxiety that had overtaken his friend in the days before his death. He recalled Cody's fears, his suspicions about Lily, his growing sense of unease as he uncovered the truth. "He told me he felt like he was losing control over everything he cared about," Jake testified, his voice trembling as he recounted his final conversation with Cody. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. And then there was Rachel, Cody's sister, the person who had been caught in the crossfire of this love triangle. Her words were heavy with guilt as she described her brother's growing concern about her influence on Lily. She spoke of the bond between them, a bond that had turned into something dangerous, something that had ultimately torn her family apart. Rachel's testimony was filled with emotion, her voice breaking as she admitted the painful truth of her own involvement. But perhaps the most emotional moment of all came when Lily herself took the stand. She was calm, but the weight of her words was undeniable. She described the moment of Cody's discovery, her panic, her fear of rejection. She spoke of the years of hiding, of the shame she had carried, and of the love she had tried so desperately to protect. But when the confrontation came, it had spiraled out of control. Lily portrayed herself not as a murderer, but as a woman who had been pushed to the edge, a woman who had acted in self-defense in a moment of desperation. The defense argued that Lily's reaction was one of pure fear, a response to Cody's devastating discovery of her past. They painted her as a vulnerable woman, one who had faced unimaginable internal struggles, and who, in that moment, was simply trying to protect herself from the man she loved. Her actions, the defense claimed, were not cold-blooded murder. They were a tragic misunderstanding, a moment where everything had gone horribly wrong. But the prosecution wasn't convinced. They countered with photographs of the crime scene, with forensic evidence that told a different story, one of rage, not fear. They emphasized the brutality of the attack, the lack of any defensive wounds on Cody's body, and the disturbing lack of remorse in Lily's demeanor. The courtroom was divided. On one side, Lily's defense painted her as a victim, a woman broken by years of hiding her truth, pushed to the edge by betrayal. On the other side, the prosecution insisted this was a calculated, violent act, one driven by rage, not fear. Was Lily a woman who had snapped in self-defense, or was she a cold-hearted murderer who had finally been caught? The jury listened, the weight of the decision heavy on their minds. And as the trial reached its conclusion, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. Every person present understood that this was no simple case of self-defense. It was a tragedy filled with layers of deceit, love, and loss. Now, all that remained was to decide whether it was a crime of passion, a deadly misunderstanding, or something far more sinister. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable as the jury deliberated. Days of emotional testimony, conflicting arguments, and gut-wrenching revelations had led to this final moment. On March 2nd, 2021, the decision came down. The jury filed in, their faces grim with the weight of their task. Lily Matthews, once a loving wife and a woman hiding behind layers of secrets, now stood before them as a convicted killer. Guilty of second-degree murder. The words echoed through the courtroom, each syllable heavy with the gravity of what had transpired. Lily's face remained impassive, but in her eyes there was a flicker of something, a realization, a recognition that her life had just been irrevocably altered. The woman who had once been so full of hope, so sure of her love for Cody, now faced the consequences of her actions. She had taken a life, and the cost was a future behind bars. The judge wasted no time in handing down the sentence. Lily Matthews would serve 25 years in prison, a sentence that felt both just and tragic. In that moment, as she was led away in handcuffs, she turned toward Rachel, sitting in the back of the courtroom, her face a mask of heartbreak. The years of family history, the shared pain, the lies and betrayals, all culminated in this single, irreversible moment. "I'm so sorry," Lily whispered, her voice breaking. But the apology fell into the empty space between them, a hollow attempt at reconciliation for a tragedy that could never be undone. The weight of her actions hung heavily in the air, and as she was escorted away, Rachel's grief became too much to bear. She had lost not just her brother, but the woman who had once been a part of her family. The aftermath of the trial was felt far beyond the courtroom. The case had become a national talking point, sparking heated debates about love, identity, and the painful realities of hidden truths. Activists for the transgender community used the case as a springboard to advocate for better understanding and acceptance. They called for more open conversations about identity, mental health, and the toll that fear and secrecy can take on individuals, families, and relationships. For Rachel, the journey was just beginning. Consumed by grief, guilt, and the overwhelming weight of her brother's death, she made the decision to enter rehab, seeking to confront her own demons. But she didn't stop there. Driven by the pain of losing Cody and the complex emotions that had unfolded during the investigation, Rachel dedicated herself to mental health advocacy. She began speaking at schools and community events, sharing Cody's story, and using her own experiences to promote awareness and understanding around mental health and addiction. Meanwhile, behind the prison walls, Lily began her own process of reflection. Her life had spiraled into a tragedy that no one could have predicted. Yet in the silence of her cell, she began to confront the deepest parts of herself, the identity she had hidden for so long, the lies she had told, and the love she had lost. Her journey of self-discovery was far from over, but the road ahead was one she would have to walk alone. As the months passed, the ripple effects of this tragic case continued to spread. It wasn't just a story of a murder, it was a story of human struggle, of the complexities of love and identity, and of the consequences of living a life built on secrets. In the end, Lily and Rachel's paths diverged, each of them left to grapple with the aftermath in their own way. And as the community of Lakeview tried to heal, they were reminded that sometimes the truth, when uncovered, can be more destructive than anyone ever imagined. But life, as it often does, continued. The case faded from the headlines, but the lessons learned about the power of honesty, the dangers of hidden pain, and the importance of understanding would stay with those involved forever. In the end, this was a story of love, love that turned to tragedy, a secret so profound it tore lives apart, and a murder that left an entire town shaken to its core. Cody Matthews, a man who thought he had everything, lost it all because of a truth he never saw coming. Was Lily's act one of fear, a desperate attempt to protect herself? Or was there something far darker at play? A calculated decision to silence the past and preserve a lie? You decide. If you found this case compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. More true crime stories are coming your way, and you won't want to miss them.